Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Increasing Access, Opening Doors for People with Disabilities. This is Christy Farnbaugh, and I'm the Innovation and Engagement Director here at the Ohio Arts Council. Part of my role at the OAC is to plan and facilitate professional learning opportunities for the field. Webinars like this one are being offered because constituents tell us you'd like to learn ways to do your work more efficiently and effectively. Today we have over 65 people registered for the session, so this is clearly a topic that we're all trying to learn more about. Before I introduce today's presenter, Erin Hoppe, who you're going to love and learn a lot from, a few technical details are necessary. Everyone on the line is muted or in listen-only mode, and this will help us cut down on feedback during the presentation. We'll use the question box in your control panel for capturing your questions for Erin. I'll monitor those and facilitate the Q&A as appropriate throughout the presentation, and then we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for specific Q&A. So feel free to, anything's fair game. We'll take a couple of polls during the webinar, so provide your feedback accordingly. The results are, you'll see the results in aggregate and not by your particular organization. So answer accordingly for those. The webinar is being recorded, and I'll send a link to everyone in the next day or two as soon as it's processed. And after today's webinar, you'll receive a link to a brief survey via your email. So please take 5 minutes and give us your feedback. Your input will help us design more meaningful professional development opportunities in the future. And with that, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Erin J. Hoppe. She has more than a decade of experience as a cultural administrator, researcher, evaluator, and advocate. Erin is Executive Director of VSA Ohio, the state arts organization on arts and disability, where she works to make the arts and culture, to make the arts and arts education more accessible and inclusive for all Ohioans. Erin holds a master's in cultural policy and arts administration degree from The Ohio State University and a Bachelor of Arts in economics with a minor in art history from the University of California, San Diego. She was a program assistant for the Partners in Education grant at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and completed an internship for the National Endowment for the Arts Government Affairs Office and the Smithsonian Institution Office of Policy and Analysis. And I would just say I've known Erin for several years, and she is just a smart, kind, caring advocate for this topic of serving people with disabilities. So with that, I'm really pleased to turn the webinar over to Erin Hoppe.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the Ohio Arts Council for letting us have this time to talk to you about accessibility, and to all of you for being on this call. I'm excited to give you some ideas and hope that it really takes you to some new places and meet new people. So first, I just want to give you a little quick background about VSA Ohio. We are a nonprofit organization that works statewide. We have a pretty small staff, but an incredibly devoted board and lots and lots of contractors and volunteers that make our work possible, who I love dearly with all my heart. As Christy said, we work to make the arts and arts education more accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. We really work at a dynamic intersection of arts and disability and education. And we really want to change perceptions about disability, what it is, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and hope that this webinar opens your eyes a little bit too. We do a lot of programs, have a lot of services, so please check out our website after this as a resource to you. And a lot of people ask me, what does VSA stand for? And you might have that same question. So I'd like to tell you that it currently does not stand for anything. Much like CBS, if you will, we did stand for, we were Very Special Arts a number of years ago. We are part of an international network and share the branding with about 80 other VSAs around the United States and around the world. But over time, words like special and handicapped really don't reflect what, current respectful language and trends. And so we're now VSA Ohio, State Organization on Arts and Disability, and we hope that you will also embrace, a more progressive language around disability. So Chrissy gave you a nice background on me. Thank you very much. I'll just let you know that when I started at VSA Ohio, I had a background in arts administration and arts education. I was definitely passionate about advocacy and equality and policy and research, but I didn't know anything about disability, to be honest with you. And over the past 8, almost 9 years, I have learned a lot. My perceptions have been changed. I look at the world differently. I've met some amazing people, and it's equality for the disability community is now really at the heart of what I love. And now it's time for our first poll as we get into the topic for today. So which of these words can I find in your organization's mission or vision or strategic plan? Is there access or inclusion, diversity, community? Which of those might we find in yours that, as a hint, align with today's topic and the work that can be done around it?
Awesome. So the numbers are coming in, Erin.
All right.
Like a couple more seconds here. I have to think about this, about what words they use, right?
Yeah. Well, these are words that are at the heart of what we do and are probably, I'm guessing, close to the heart of a lot of your work. We tend to think about these things in terms of underserved audiences and racial diversity and income diversity. And I'm here to tell you that all of those things apply to the disability community as well, and are another slice of that, of the communities we hope to serve.
Yeah, so you should see the results on your screen.
If I had it bigger. Looks like, oh, polls, here we go. Good, community. We are all about community and people. I'm very happy to see about half of you have access and inclusion, and diversity is, of course, up there. So it's right in line. You guys are, so this should help you weave what you're doing into what you're already doing and know that it's a priority for your institution or your organization, wherever you are. And now I have a second question for you. Do you know someone with a disability? Is that disability physical? Is it developmental? Is it what we might call hidden or invisible, mentally and emotionally? Or maybe you don't know, or maybe you don't know somebody with a disability. Oh, almost 100%. That's great, yeah.
Yeah, votes are popping in. I'm going to close the poll here in just one moment. Second. Not a moment, a second.
Nah.
We're at 96%.
Yeah, so
Get that last vote. All right, I'm going to close it, and I'm going to share it. There you go.
So that is basically all of you who know someone with a disability. And the point of this is to, you know, show us and help us realize that disability affects all of us. And if you live long enough, it might. So here's some quick stats for you. 1 in 5 Americans has a disability. Those with disabilities are employed at about half the rate of people without disabilities. And that also translates into a poverty rate among people with disabilities that's more than twice as high as people without disabilities. It also represents a fairly significant deficiency in education and have a lower high school graduation rate, have much lower access to post-secondary or career training once they transition into adulthood. And for just a quick stat, the incidence of autism these days is about 1 in 68 people, or 1 in 68 new diagnoses. The stat is currently 4 to 1 more common in boys than girls, but I was just told recently that that may not be the case, and that the way autism manifests in women versus men might be different, and thus the testing that is available for diagnosis might not be catching all of those young women who might fall somewhere along the autism spectrum. So just a few things to show that it's disability is all around us and the impact that it can have on our lives. So why are you here today? Why are we here today? Why open the doors to disability? Well, for one, it's the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act applies. If you receive any kind of state or federal funding for your organization, this applies. In the education system, we have IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Equality and inclusion are the law. And it also makes good business sense. 1 in 5 equals 20% of America, which is a large market share. And people with disabilities, much like others, do not travel alone. So cultivate them and make them part of your community, and there will be, you know, some return on that investment. As we saw from the questions, it really does seem to align with your missions and your strategic plans. It's part of what you're doing already. It's also an organizational asset. It shows that you value inclusion and diversity and different visitors, and you really want to welcome everyone. It's also the right thing to do. Every human has rights. This is really, disability rights are also a civil rights issue and a social justice issue, and it's a movement that's growing. And quite honestly, it's a selfish thing to do. At some point, either I know someone now that I want to take with me to the theater, or at some point in my life, if I live long enough, I'm likely to develop a disability, and I want to know that I can continue to enjoy the arts and cultural experiences when I get older, or when things change in my life, when or if things change in my life. So I would be neglect to not acknowledge your barriers to why, you know, accessibility for people with disabilities might, you know, it might be kind of new for your organization. You know, people say that they don't know how, or it's hard, or, you know, what if I say the wrong thing, or I can't get support from others at my job, or I don't have the budget, which you're in the right place, because we're looking at free tips here that don't cost anything. And the asterisks there on we don't have time, I'll be honest, it's a real thing. The recommendations that I have to make will cost you time, and will be time, but it will be time well spent. That you see will open the doors to not just people with disabilities, to so many others in your community. So let's get into your free tips here today. Number 1, attitude. Free, all day, every day. A famous autism self-advocate named Stephen Shore is quoted as saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because autism manifests itself so differently. And I take that further to mean if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability, and the accommodations that work for one might not work for others. So we as a creative field have to be open and flexible and creative with our ideas. And I'll further that to say, if you've met one person, you've met one person. Even identical twins are different, and so we can't really do a one-size-fits-all in terms of accommodation, though we'll talk about universal design later. For attitude, also, you know, words matter, language matters. I have to take a moment to talk to you about people first language. This is the 21st century. People are not retarded or handicapped or wheelchair bound. We are all people first. So I would like to encourage you to really use person first language and think about describing them as somebody who uses a wheelchair instead, or somebody who has a developmental disability. Or maybe you could just use their name as a descriptor as well, because their disability is part of them, but that's not all. And I do have 2 other asterisks here around autistic and deaf, because, you know, there's a lot of growing pride in the disability community in the sense of taking it back. And so a lot of self-advocates will use terms like disabled or autistic or neurodivergent because that's how they recognize themselves. The deaf community is very proud and are very proud to be deaf and don't see it as a disability at all. So as a customer service industry and as an industry that thinks about our community, we are a people-first area. And if you need to know and to describe a disability, it's good practice to ask someone what they would prefer, if they would prefer to say they have autism or they're autistic. But also don't make assumptions about anything. Just ask if you need to ask. In terms of customer service, boy, the arts are a customer service industry. People that make the choice to come to our spaces and programs and events, and we all want everyone to have a good time. So the way you treat and respond to people with disabilities or their accommodation requests, which we might just consider considerations, because we're just making considerations for people to be able to take part in our activities. And when you treat people well, they come back and they tell other people. We know that for everyone. So it's the same feeling for the disability community. All right, tip number 2. Get to know disability. Understand it more. It's a spectrum. So you're probably most used to seeing that symbol in the middle there, the bright blue one. Of the wheelchair, the handicap sign, but in case you didn't know, back in 1968, this bottom left symbol was created as the original design for how to visually describe disability. But you'll notice that it's lacking a head, and that's quite a depersonalization of a representation. So they moved to this blue international symbol, and these days you might see more and more of the top right guy, who I like to call our Zoom guy, which you'll notice is more active and shows somebody who is actually a person doing something independently. And so we want to think of people as much more than just a wheelchair, because they are so much more. So what else can you know? I talk about it being a spectrum. Not all disabilities are the same. So what it means for one person to be in a wheelchair is not necessarily what it means for another person to use a wheelchair. For visual impairment, it's different for everyone. Each person is different. You might be colorblind, or you might have, your whole vision might be blurry, or you might just have spots in your vision, or you might have a real pinhole or blurry outer vision. It depends. And that means, we're looking at this braille on the right-hand side here. Some visually impaired people might want to use braille, or they might just need large print, or they might want their documents electronically in advance to read them over before they get there. So it's important to ask what that accommodation or consideration might be and not just assume. I talked a little bit about autism. These are some of the different types of ways that autism manifests in everyone. It relates to social skills and communication, some restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. There's a lot of sensory issues around touch and taste and smell and color. And so the features are really unique to each individual. And I was talking with a mom of a young man with autism yesterday, and she knows what works for her kid, but that does not mean she knows how to exactly meet the needs of another kid with autism, because those features could be really different. So it's good to always just assume respect and know that we could design broadly and think broadly about things, but everyone's going to be different. Here on your screen, don't worry, your eyes are okay. Dyslexia affects 1 in 5 people in America, and it affects their reading, writing, spelling, and speaking. This was a GIF from CNN by somebody who was asked to visually kind of show what it looks like what it might look like for somebody with dyslexia, and how the letters jump around and turn themselves around. So just having that, compassion and sensitivity that it might take somebody a little longer to do something doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. It just means they're working through what they need to on their end. How else can you get to know disability? You can get to know disability art, much like throughout art history there have been different art movements and different schools. There are artists out there who have disabilities who are making art around their disability and using it as a means of communication and showing what life is like. So there's a lot of disability artists out there who are working to champion disability rights through performance art or visual art or whatever their art may be. And there's also artists who just happen to have a disability, who want to make art, who are pursuing it as a career or pursuing it as for fun, and might just need an adaptation or two in order to create that art. You should also know that, I mentioned it being a social justice issue. Back in Pennsylvania, they did a survey, and 80% of people surveyed said they believe that society thinks individuals with physical, mental, or intellectual disabilities with discomfort and awkwardness. That needs to change. It's a stigma associated with people with disabilities. So the council went around and took phrases like most disabled people are just scamming the system and plastered them all over the city to get people to really think about, is that really true, or is that just an assumption that I make? And some people want to do the right thing and don't necessarily understand that negative comments can impact, so much. So let's get to see people with disabilities for who they really are and not see them for their disability. All right, so if we're going to break down barriers, you have to know what those barriers are. You have to understand them. For many, many years, people with disabilities lived within the medical model of disability. And within that world, it says that disability is the problem. The individual is the problem. They're impaired. We need to cure them. We need to alleviate their impairment. But that is not so positive to say something's wrong. It led to a lot of institutionalization of people, segregation of people, and that's that's changing. People with disabilities are changing that. They're turning it around and saying that they're okay. They were born one way or acquired something, and that it's society and the environment that's inaccessible. Buildings are inaccessible. Communication is inaccessible, but we as a society can break down those barriers and be more flexible and develop, drop our prejudices and discrimination and embrace practices that are inclusive of people with disabilities. Some of the main barriers for people with disabilities are financial. It costs a lot to have a disability, and there's a lot of disincentives in the employment field where people with disabilities may be getting services or things from the government, but then if they make too much money, it cuts back on their disability income or disability support system. And so it's a real struggle that people with disabilities face. But we did some research a few years ago around the autism community, and people, if they know that they are welcomed and they want to come and they know that they'll have a good experience there and not be treated differently, they will pay to come to your institutions. They want to be part of society just like everyone else. Transportation is an issue. Physical buildings, awareness of what the barriers and the disability experience is. Social capital, which briefly is friends, is incredibly low among the disability community, some of the lowest for anyone. So as arts institutions that are making connections and building connections and welcoming all people and trying to facilitate community, we have such a unique capacity or a unique opportunity to facilitate connections among people of different types. And then, of course, those attitudinal and perceptual barriers that exist, which we can't fix them all in our space, but we can make steps. You should also, I mean, thinking about art itself, people with disabilities are not really well represented in theater. There are barriers from the school age when, you know, they might not have access to arts education, getting all the way to the audition room, is it accessible? And getting onto the stage itself, is that accessible? And over time there's been a lot of appropriating disability. You know, theater tells a lot of stories, but whose stories are they telling, and who's writing those stories? Who's on stage? Is somebody in a wheelchair cast solely in a wheelchair role? Is somebody without a disability cast for that wheelchair role? Could that person in a wheelchair play anyone and just happen to be a wheelchair user in that story? We know that Academy Awards often go to people without disabilities, portraying people with disabilities. So why are we not just, how can we as arts organizations working with young people all the way up into adulthood and beyond, opening the door for them to get on stage and to be part of that process? Jumping now to assistive technology. Think about it. It's used by people with disabilities. It is also, in fact, used by, I think, probably at least half of you that are on this call. You could pretend that I'm wearing that suit addressing you. I might not be that dressed up today, but I am wearing my glasses today. And if I didn't wear them, I would have a lot more trouble navigating the world and being part of the world. Hearing aids, those are accessible assistive technology. And it can be much more simple too. In the bottom right, those are adaptive paintbrushes and a pen that's been adapted with a tennis ball so that somebody who has grip issues can still write or paint or whatever they need to do. They can grip better. There's a lot out there in the world around assistive technology and how you can either buy it or how you can create it yourself by thinking outside the box and thinking about what each individual in your space might need. If you own a smartphone or an iPad or have ever used Siri or Cortana or talk to text, that is assistive technology that is used by all of us, and that gets around to that universal design aspect where what's good for people with disabilities is good for everyone, and there have been a ton of advances in this world. The top right is an iPad, but it is used, it's a pictogram kind of device where people who have low communication, verbal communication capacities can use this to push the button of what they feel or want to say, and then it talks for them. So you may, as an institution, need to think about, you know, loosening your rules for assistive technology in your spaces. I mean, if somebody is using an iPad to play poker in your theater, that's probably not okay. But if they're using it to communicate, that's okay. You might have the bottom left, assistive listening devices in your theater or museum, and that's fabulous. Does everyone know where they are? Does somebody know how to use them? Who checks them to make sure that they're in working order so that when I show up, they're working and I can actually use them? So you have to educate your staff and anybody who might come into contact with a user of one of these about how to use them. And just on the right there, that's just some people will use adaptive pointers to be able to use computers or different things like that. So think about technology and how it might show up in your spaces and programs. Now, you should also know that access is a process. You have to assess. You have to identify human resources and other resources. You have to plan. You have to implement. You have to evaluate. You have to refine. You have to repeat, just like anything else, any other programs that we do. And it's important to be strategic about it. This is really a grassroots and a grass tops situation. It's best when there is buy-in from all levels. I've seen people who get it assigned accessibility, people who it's half their job, or people who are access coordinators, or worked with vice presidents of diversity who make it on. And until that becomes part of the institutional makeup, if one of those people should leave, all the progress that's made could fall by the wayside. So try to get the whole team and all levels involved. And that goes, this is just a, forgive the clip art, I'm not a designer, someday I will, but you know, you Google images and this is what you get. And actually I had to Google hard to find diversity in such a high five situation. But look back at those reasons why diversity matters and think about them for your institution, and think about why it matters to your board of directors and why it matters to your executive director and why it matters to the docents that are in the halls, and get that buy-in. And if you're inviting people, just get the buy-in, and remember that you could take baby steps. That's okay. You shouldn't just jump into, you know, well, we're going to do ASL and touch tour and da-da-da-da. Think about what works for your organization. Start internally and add from there, work out. You don't have to jump into a huge project before you do the research and you get that buy-in. So take stock. If you're planning this, it's important to know where you are, right? Think about the arc of engagement. Think about the arc of engagement that people go through to be part of your organization or institution or program, right? What policies are in place right now? What people are involved? Who's responsible for what? What does your marketing look like? What does your ticket look like? What is it? How do people get to your space? Do they know how to get to your space? Does your website help them find your space and then know where to park or what bus lines are available? What happens when people walk into your front door? Is it confusing? Is there enough signage? Can they orientate themselves? Do you need to have somebody there to ask to help with directions? Some of you might have cafeterias or cafes. Do you have options? Do you have vegetarian options, gluten-free options? Are you sensitive to allergies? Some people, you know, I don't prefer fish when I go out to eat, but I'm not allergic. But for some people, an allergy is a real thing, and so giving options is a nice thing to do, and thinking about that. So really take stock and know that I can't tell you how to evaluate this. You have to create your own outcomes and measures of success, because what my measures and outcomes are different than what your measures and outcomes would be, which are different from the next theater or the next museum. So you really have to think internally about what success looks like for you. Look at your strategic plan and policies. You have to think about what matters. Are you focusing on physical? Are you focusing on numbers? What is it? And bring people with disabilities in on that conversation about evaluation. So you can come up with those on your own, because outcomes and measures are important, so that when you do it again, you can do it even better. Number 7, write an access statement. Do you have one? Can I find it on your website or in your brochure? Or if I call, will people know what the policies are? Does your policy have a contact? If I have questions, is there somebody that I can specifically reach out to? Is there a point person on your staff that's responsible for this? And most importantly, if you're going to come up with an access statement, then you have to follow through. If people call you and ask for something, then you have to be willing and ready to work with them to make that accessibility consideration happen. You can't just say it and then not do it. And you can't be frustrated when somebody asks for something. You might come up with 5 ideas to the solution that might not work for them, but you can just ask them what they want, and then maybe you can find some middle ground to meet them and how you can help them. When it comes to an access statement, you can write a short, sweet one. You could be nice, short and sweet and broad, right? So this is just an example of VSA Ohio is committed to providing an excellent experience to all of our constituents, especially people with disabilities. Contact Erin Hoppe at my phone number with any accommodation requests or questions. That leaves it open to people to know that I value them and their requests, and I'll do what I can, and they just need to be in touch with me. You could start small, and then as you develop your programs and your policies, you can be more specific. I would encourage you to check out the Andy Warhol Museum's access page. It took 2 clicks to find it. I went to the home section, I went to the visitor section, and then I was there when I clicked accessibility. I didn't have to dig around the website to find it. It was right there as part of how I get to their space and how I participate in their space. So they have a real sweet and short statement that they're committed to providing an excellent experience to visitors of all backgrounds and abilities. And then they go on the left, you can see that they have a specific contact. Well, if you go down further, there's even a more specific contact, but they have a place where you can email. And then they list out what their specific programs are that are specifically for the disability community. So think about what you can do and what you can add to that, but let people know what you are doing or what you invite them to do. Now, the other thing I'll say is it's also okay, so there are access accommodations like ASL interpretation or audio description that are services. They are professional services that you should expect to pay for. And you might decide to do an ASL performance as part of your series, and you pick Saturday afternoon, and you mark it Saturday afternoon. But what if that person who would use the ASL wants to come on Friday night, right? So what do you do when you do this professional service that you can't just pick up the phone and have somebody come the night of who needs to practice and understand what they're about to see? So it's okay to put something in there that says to request a professional service you must do so 2 weeks in advance. You get that up there, that's your policy, and then people know that's your policy. And if it doesn't work out for that time because they requested 2 days before, then you can work with them for the next performance. But you've got it on your site. So let me jump to now. Usually I would ask for questions, but I'll just keep going. So design universally, right? I said one size doesn't fit all, but that doesn't mean it can't. If you think about universal design, which came to us from the architecture field. So on the right you'll see this cool staircase that invites people to use the stairs or a ramp. And the idea is that you're really maximizing usability for an array of people, that it's a flexible design, that it's really seamless, and that, yeah, it requires the mindful, you got to be a creative designer. Universal design, doesn't have to be ugly or unaesthetic. It can still look good. It just requires some thought in advance. And by doing so, you're really going to benefit everyone. If you, design buy those handles for your doors instead of the knobs, anyone can use that. If, let's say I broke an arm and, was in a cast, then I'd still be able to open the door even with a temporary disability. Or if I have 5 bags of groceries, I can still open the door without putting them all down. Or if I'm pushing a stroller, then I can also get up the stairs to the front door just like somebody who's using a crutch or a walker or a wheelchair or who has a seeing eye dog. It's good for everyone. You can do design universally in your exhibitions. There's a whole field around universal design for exhibitions and making sure that you're taking into account all different types of people who will be interacting with those exhibitions. There is also a ginormous field around universal design for learning. You can look at the CAST, C-A-S-T, website for more information. But we do not all learn the same. We do not all process information the same. And we do not all express the same. And so universal design for learning takes that into account. And as you are designing a lesson plan, you are taking different ways of engagement and sharing into account and allowing for people who learn differently to all be part of it, not just forcing them all to climb the tree in the same way. So if you do any kind of education, I encourage you to check out UDL and CAST. Now I'm going to jump to getting people in the doors, marketing to everyone. You can let people know that you're inviting them, and you can aesthetically make it more inviting. So when you're designing something, I know people will say, ugh, large print, like that's going to ruin the aesthetics. So maybe, or maybe you can just, you know, if you're looking down at the bottom right-hand box that says design, option A, you're invited, option B, you're invited. You can still find a nice font and find a nice look that is easier to read than something small. Even myself, who is fairly young and just uses glasses, when I get these gala party invitations and the script, I'm just like, I wish that this was an easier font to read. Be clear and clean. Clean goes a long way. Will it really detract from your gallery if the tags next to the artwork are font size 18 versus font size 12? I mean, you're the judge of that. It's your space, but more people will be able to read it more easily if it's slightly larger. You can also, you know, if you're thinking about color blindness or people who are sensitive to different colors, there are a ton of guidelines that exist on what colors do and don't work together for somebody who has a vision impairment. We'll talk about partners here in a minute, but word of mouth is huge in the disability community. When you get people on your side and they know that they're welcome and that you'll listen to them, then they're going to tell their friends and they're going to be your advocates as well. For your online, for your website, have you had it checked out to see if it's screen reader friendly? There are resources online that you can check with, and there are resources in Ohio that you could reach out to some visually impaired, you know, community groups or service organizations that could help you test that. How many clicks, you know, is your accessibility and visitor information buried deep down in your website that, you know, I might not be able to find it easily? And hyperlinks. So a lot of people do, for more information, click here, and then hyperlink, click here. But when screen readers go through your site, it's going to pull all of the click here's to a sidebar that the user can then scroll through to go to click through. And if you have 5 different click here's on one website, it gets really confusing for the user. So if you simply hyperlink the full sentence or hyperlink, you know, a chunk of the words that makes it more clear, then it's just going to be a lot easier, and it makes no difference if you click, you know, hyperlink the whole sentence or just here. So just think about that. Also think about accessibility symbols. So if you're doing something that's accessible, or you have, you know, a wheelchair accessible space, then you should use these visual cues to let people know. The top left is a wayfinder if for people with low vision, or that just means you have somebody there who's going to help direct someone where they actually need to go and take them to their seat, and be there for assistance. Audio description, if you're having somebody come and describe a performance or have a tour available for audio description of your gallery, that advertise it, talk about it. The difference, so we all know what closed caption is, and thank goodness they have it so that we're in the restaurants, we can see what's happening on the TV. The difference between closed caption and open caption is that open caption, where closed will just try to report the words that are spoken. Open caption will also give you like a music symbol to know that music is playing, or it will give you a kind of an onomatopoeia or wind blow, storm raging, wind gusts, so that people who are actually just reading it can understand what's actually happening on the screen, all the noises that a hearing person would be able to hear. So use these. And symbols are, I can't stress, icons and symbols enough. You may, these are available for free online, but you can also visually represent a lot of different things, like in your signage, in your bathrooms and directions. And that's not just going to benefit people with disabilities, that's certainly going to benefit young children, people who English is their second language. A lot of people, it's like math. It's a universal language, pictures. So once part of that marketing is really going to be, and in general, I want to really leave you with recruitment and getting people with disabilities involved in wherever you are. Marketing will bring in that audience. Can you find volunteers who have disabilities, or do you have volunteers already with disabilities that can be part of the process? Bring on people with disabilities to your board. Bring them on as interns or staff or artists or staff. You might have to make some reasonable accommodations in the workplace, and that's a whole other webinar. But you're really valuing difference, and it's an important component for people with disabilities to add things to their resume as interns or as volunteers. Artists, bring in artists with disabilities. Find them locally, or find there's like Deaf West is an amazing theater group, I think out of New York, who actually I believe is coming to Ohio in not that long, but recognize and give opportunity to artists with disabilities. Look to partners, which I'll talk about in a second, and think about an accessibility committee. So it may start with just 1 or 2 people on your staff, and you invite 1 or 2 people with disabilities from your existing volunteer corps, or that you recruit from the community, and use them to help you design programs from the beginning. If you invite somebody with a visual impairment to help you design a touch tour, they're sure going to help you think about a ton of things that you might not have thought about, and then they're going to know that you did it well, and they're going to tell their friends and help you advertise it. Really, just find your people, find your partners. They're out there. They want to be involved. They will appreciate the inclusion. If you're, think strategically about it. These are some of our Arts and Autism Conference partners, and so we knew we were doing an autism program, and so we looked at the autism community. The sensory-friendly experience, if you develop that for your organization, yes, autism, also traumatic brain injury groups, also dementia and retirement homes. If you're looking at visually impaired programs, look to the American Council of the Blind Ohio, look to Voice Corps, look to Pilot Dogs, look to local service organizations, or even optometrists and hospitals. Kind of think outside your box and expand your sphere, and reach people in meaningful ways, and bring them in from the beginning to be part of it, and then throughout so that they can help you evaluate and keep working on it. Find your people, find your partners. VSA Ohio could not do much of what we do without the kindness of partners to help us reach audiences and really think critically about the work that we do. That's kind of my last. Also, well, before I go to this, I will say let VSA Ohio be a resource for you as well. Please think about us as a resource. And so I leave you with this question of what will their experience be. As arts cultural administrators and other people who work with the public, we should care about the experience, and we should care about inclusion. And we have come a really long way since the Americans with Disabilities Act 26 years ago, and still have a long way to go. So I hope that you will help create a great experience, that you will not be the disability conference that does not have an accessible front entrance, but rather that you will be the institution on the bottom right who is welcoming all manner of people into their space and continuing to create great experiences for your community. So that said, I will be very happy to take any questions. We went through a lot pretty quickly, so please let me know.
Great, Erin. Thank you so much. You know, I've heard you do this presentation 3 or 4 times, and I learn something new every time. Oh, I hadn't thought about it like that. And, you know, I was, last week I was at the National Arts Marketing Conference, and there was a session, a couple of sessions about accessibility and disability and serving all people, and just taking a walk around your space is a good place to start, right? Just look at it through the lens of someone who's coming to your event, and think about someone maybe in a wheelchair or with a disability and what their experience. I love how you hit on experience. So now's the time, y'all, to type in any questions you have for Erin. We didn't really have any questions throughout, although we had a request for a sample access statement, which you sort of hit on in one of your slides, and gave us some good places to go look for that, the Warhol Museum and such. So that should be a good resource. One of our listeners has suggested that you change, instead of the VSA, could be very spectacular arts.
Not bad.
Right?
Not bad.
Creative and fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I get to,
you and I.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you and I talk all the time about how if we do the right thing and make our places accessible for people with disabilities, it'll be more accessible for everybody, quite honestly.
Absolutely. So one of the things that works really well for people who are on the autism spectrum is they're visual learners, they're used to routines, and they do a lot of preparation to go places. And there are tools called visual stories, social stories, if you will, that help prepare somebody for going to the doctor. This is what will happen. And cultural institutions can do that too. It can be in the form of a PowerPoint or a video, but it's really it's walking somebody through how to get to your space, what happens when they get there, what the front door looks like, what do you do when you go inside, where are the resources. If you put that together, thinking of the autism community, there are actually probably a lot of people who may not have been to your space that would benefit from being able, I know that I like to know where I'm going, and I do research, I do the map, and I want to make sure I know what to do. So putting that tool together for that community is also going to be of great value to any new audience member.
Yep, absolutely. And older adults. So the Arts Council is doing some work around creative aging and the arts with older adults, and we know transportation and what to expect and what happens when I get there are also barriers as we age. So we have a couple questions, Erin.
All right.
The first is from Don, and he wants to know, are there any institutional funders who provide support for employing artists with disabilities, particularly in Ohio?
Ooh, Good question. So Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities is our state public agency that works on employment for people with disabilities. They'll work with job coaches. It's a Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation. They would be a great place to start to find out what the actual if you're interested in getting involved and working on that, they're going to have the more specific resources around employment. There's also a group in Central Ohio called Mentoring People with Disabilities that's focused on employment for people with disabilities. That can, I don't know that they're a funder by any means. They're a nonprofit as well, I think, but they would know a lot more resources as well to look at. There are also different groups like job coach areas. So here locally, there's a place called Food for Good Thought or Greenleaf JTS. So everybody is likely to have a local job coach organization nearby that can help point you to resources in your area. Google is a good friend.
Yeah, awesome. Great resources. All right, we have a couple more. From Tess, could you give some resources or examples of how to produce audio descriptions in a gallery setting?
Okay, so audio description in a gallery setting. I would look at the Smithsonian. Has a lot of resources around accessibility. If you Google Smithsonian Access, I believe MoMA also does a lot around accessibility. There are resources within VSA. If you go to the Kennedy Center website and find VSA, or you could Google VSA at the Kennedy Center, it's actually the Department of VSA and Accessibility. And there are a lot of resources around there around performing arts in general, but around audio description. There are a couple of, there's a Audio Description Institute that I would Google and find some information about. And I can also, Christy, if we make a little mental note, I'll try to send a couple of links when you send out the recording information, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great, Erin, for sure. Or if you have a, you want to create a one-pager and we'll just upload it as a Word doc or something like that, that would be great.
And I will also say, please check out VSAO.org. We have resources in a couple different areas in the About Us section, as well as cultural access. There are a number of the prime organizations that and resources on the website, on our website.
Great. And I have one more question. So seeing we're just a couple minutes before the hour is up, let's take one more. This is from Elizabeth. Our organization would like to offer audio description on a more regular basis. I've been warned that it's difficult to truly serve people with vision difficulties unless we are on a bus line and the performances provided at the time the buses are running. If I can't control the time of their location, are there ways I can connect with the community to rise above the transportation obstacle?
So that was sorry, it was a little jumbled, but I think the question was around wanting to offer audio description tours and the bus schedule and transportation for that?
Yes, yeah, she's been warned. They want to do more audio description, but she's kind of been warned and told by people you have to be on a bus line and you got to offer your performance at the time the buses are running.
Yeah.
Well, you go ahead, and then I have a suggestion too. So.
Yeah, so I would say around, we talked about transportation as an issue for people with disabilities. So either, they might be able to drive, or they might have a ride, or they might have to take the bus, or they might have to take, in Columbus, we have, there's a specific, you can call for a ride share, which are notoriously late or don't show up. There's also the issue of, you know, if you call a cab, I have visually impaired friends that have called Ubers, and then they won't take her dog, her seeing eye dog with her. No dogs in the car. So my first comment is, or my fourth maybe, is that thank you for thinking about how people are getting to your space and taking that into consideration when you make plans. So I would check the bus schedule nearby. I would also, you know, link on your site or something, or know the local services that do offer ride and transportation options. And then, you know, you kind of just have to pick if you're going to pick a time, you kind of just have to pick your time once you've done a little bit of research, and then give that, you know, 2-week request policy so that you can adapt, you know, add a description if needed. Or you could, you know, not pre-schedule it and wait for somebody to call and request it. I mean, there's only so much that you can do once they get to your door, and for them to get to your door, you know, it kind of has to be up to them, right? You can't offer transportation stipends for people to come and see your space. So the best I can say is that, you know, be open and flexible and understanding and ready to meet their request if they wanted a different day. And then, you know, ask them, say, well, you know, this is where we are now. For our next, what's the next thing that you would like to attend? Let's work with you to plan out, you know, and see if we can pre-schedule it on a time when you would like to come. And then bring in those partners to help you make those decisions.
Great. Awesome. And with that, we're just a minute past 11. So again, thank you, Erin, so much for your time and information today. This was really helpful webinar to get us started. We'll be doing another webinar on another kind of disability topic with Erin early in 2017. So you'll get emails about that from us. So again, thanks, Erin, for joining us, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.